waiting for pickup. It's time to do the Game of Thrones tour. I've been waiting for this a long time, and I am happy the weather is okay. So let's see what we can see today. Yeah!
So successful, nor were they definitely sure that they were going to go for a second season. So they came to Malta on a rather limited budget, which budget was about $3.5 million per episode. Now that is what we call the spend below the line. So that's what they use insofar as filming is concerned. In actual fact, the budget for season 1 was more akin 10 million, almost well 10 million. It was about $65 million in total, meaning that they had the above-the-line expenses, such as the royalties they paid to George Martin for his writing credits and the producer's fees, as well as the marketing expense to make Game of Thrones the new household name it has become. That alone had reportedly a budget of around $10 million. So though they rig in front of what used to be the iconic Azure Window in Dwayra, which I'm sure you've all heard by now, perished forever in storms on the 8th of March of last year. That was a very tragic loss to us locals here as well. And basically, as I said, this is exactly the place where Game of Thrones started filming internationally. So the first action was yelled out in these very gardens on the 8th of June 2010. So here we are right in front of the main stairwell that leads to the palace. That's the same place I told you where Helen was killed in Helen of Troy. And that's, of course, as I said, also home to our president. And inside there, a lot of filming also took place from Game of Thrones. So let's make our way. I want to start showing you some photos now. This courtyard has been used for a lot of what we call period films. And by period films, we mean that the filming date precedes the present by at least 25 years. So it could be in the 70s, or it could be in the 1300s, which is when fictitiously Game of Thrones is supposedly set. Now, the further back in time you go, the more money you need to invest to redress the place according to the era, plus of course the added expense for costumes and makeup and so on. HBO were not so willing to invest such money here, being a pilot project, so they left this square exactly as you see it, and this becomes the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark's residence in King's Landing. And check out how simple it was. So I'm going to stay moving from side to side to keep the background behind me to help you understand better how it features. So imagine the camera is where you are, that's the shot of these two different scenes. Here, Ned Stark is coming out through that arch to greet Peter Baelish. You can see the gate we just walked through, closed, and the only other thing they did, they removed the clock, the round thing you see on the gate, and they removed the lantern up top. But to save time and money, they left the bracket of the lantern in shot, which though a small one still remains a mistake, because it's obvious that that is basically a lantern bracket. Nothing else was added to the ground. Ned Stark is over here. That's the angle of the camera, so that's the same wall and shrubs behind. And this is a very important scene. This is where he is informed that his longtime friend and ally, Robert Baratheon, played by Mark Eddy, had died following the hunting incident, that his brother Renly had run off with his 50 strongmen, and that Joffrey was crowned king. So it was a scene very rich in emotions. On the same scene, on reverse angle, if you can just pivot your heads, I'll move myself. So camera is now here, facing our lovely two Irish actors. And that's Aidan Gillen who plays Peter Baelish, and that's Conrad Hill who plays Lord Varys. Now in the corner behind me, you can see a white fight coming down, and a potted plant which was previously the larger plant in the corner, both of which should never be in shot, yet you can see them both very clearly over here and over here. So again, these are little mistakes which they did overlook in the initial filming stages. You can see the three small windows which which is fine. You don't see the lanterns and the CCTV camera, which obviously were removed. Now today is a mild day. When we filmed this day, it was 36 degrees Celsius in the shade and 76% humidity. Hot in shorts, let alone if you dressed up as a stork. And that was me on the day. Check out how much stuff I'm wearing. I have long woolen trousers instead of my riding boots. I have 3 long sleeve t-shirts, a 25 kilo full body chainmail, very heavy leather cladding, hood, helmet and horse. And that's when we're alive. We were cast 40 people to get killed, so we're like stunts. And then when we get killed, we have to wear a stunt armor, which is like molded plastic, same like motorcyclists wear, which required an additional 2 layers of quilt-like material to cover them. So 3 layers on top of this. Insane. It was, we were dead from the heat before it started. And that's not the worst part. The worst part, all of us, was the makeup. Now, in all fairness, Starks didn't have as much makeup as the White Walkers, for instance, and the Children of the Forest. Those had to go between 8 to 10 hours of makeup each day for 1 hour of filming and then 3 hours to remove it. But we had our fair share here because they really had to dirty us up. This is being the long journey on the road. They rubbed this grit in our face. They painted underneath our fingernails, in our ears, our lobes. They even had this goo which they brushed over our teeth. It solidified. It was like peanut butter with glue to make our teeth look green because there was no personal hygiene there. So obviously we went through a lot. When we were Dothrakis it was worse because Dothrakis were semi-naked. So all our tattoos are in shock now. So I had to go through the ordeal of having this covering makeup, which was very difficult to remove at the end. But still, it's so great fun when you get to be involved on a project like Game of Thrones. Now, what we did then, you see these arches, we dressed up each arch to make them look like stables. Second arch is actually a tunnel, so we stuck red doors on it, a couple of horses, a saddle, and a camera on a tripod. And we filmed the whole scene inside out. That is now later in season 1, when Joffrey, as the new king, sends his Lannister guards to eradicate all the Starks in King's Landing. So that's the view from the room, that's the same pelmet running across the terrace in front. Now here you can see lots of Starks being killed, and the killings served only to pave the way for what was to come. And that was Arya Stark locating the needle, her sword, and accidentally committing her first kill. She kills the stable boy, which scene was filmed over this grate 10 meters behind me. So you can see how in one physical location, we've already had 3 sets. Gardens of King's Landing, Tower of the Hand, and the stables. And you would probably say, that's good enough for a week, yeah? It wasn't, because when you're in a budget, you try to maximize your stay in one location. Because every time you move a set, you have to physically move the unit base and the tech base, which is a major, costly, and logistical nightmare. So to extend their stay here, they created another set. And our next set is supposedly, geographically, 20 miles away from the Tower of the Hand. In reality, it's only 20 meters away. And it's over here. So this tunnel you're seeing behind me, this in the show is being referred to as being called Major's Holdfast, spelled M-A-E-G-O-R''S, which was basically the entrance to the royal chambers inside King's Landing. That's where Robert and Joffrey Baratheon would have stayed and where the Stargers were accommodated during their stay. In the second season, when Stannis Baratheon tries to actually penetrate the city, okay, the famous Battle of Blackwater, that was supposedly fictitiously on the outside of the door, but they would have never been able to use it because there's a wall, not a lake. That's why officially they said that's the reason why they moved to the Brovnik, but you now know the true reason what it is. So basically this, okay, was mostly remembered for this scene. The decapitation scene of Septa Modane, played by Susan Brown, the nurse and tutor of the Stargers, who travelled all the way from Winterfell to King's Landing. So basically you can again see how simple it was to dress it up. Fine layer of soil to cover the flagstones, removal of the 3 central lanterns, and that's it. Because 7 years ago there were no planters, no floodlights, and no billboards. Camera is in the arch facing up, and the actors make their way at living until they stop in front of the light of the doorway, and Septa Mordane pretends to overhear the cries of her fellow Starks as they're being killed. And basically, What happens here is that she sends Sansa scurrying back to her room. But Sansa never makes it. As you may recall, the Hound intercepts her and takes her to Queen Cersei. And then she awaits her fate as the Lannister guards arrive, and basically we never see her decapitation, we next see her head on a spike next to Ned Stark's in Traitor's Walk, which was another location. After this, then, we film the scene where Arya is actually chasing cats. This little scene took 3 days to film and was filmed in 3 different locations. This is the middle part. The first part was in Mbina, I'll walk you through the street later, and the last part was in the dungeons where she hides behind the dragon skulls, which is somewhere else completely. This is the part where she enters the actual tunnel. And this was filmed both ways. First looking up and then first looking down towards us. So you can see how one location here was used and reused, and we managed to get so many scenes from just 5 days of filming. Monastery, and the main difference to when it was built lies in the flooring. These flagstones are a more recent addition. Before, there used to be the old traditional Maltese tiles. This is also the only place in the world to have 5 sundials in one location. You can see 2 there, a small one giving you the months of the year, a larger one giving you a segment of time, and a similar larger one abuts on either terrace, left and right. And then there's a large circular one on the ground in the private gardens behind. Now here, together with our first location, San Anton, and our next location, Ndina, when we market Malta overseas for filming, we market these 2 locations as one location fits all, meaning shots may be filmed interchangeably to give you the false impression it's the same location. And because of that, no CGI was ever needed for either of these 2 locations, and dressing was always kept very simple. Game of Thrones really capitalized on that, and this, as the Red Keep, check out how simple. There you have shots of Ned Stark walking along. You can see the same colonnade, you can see the same flagstones, and nothing else was dressed. The only thing we did here, went up on step ladders to replace the light bulbs on the chandeliers with candles. Just that. And in front of the doorways, we just stuck these mobile uprisers. So it was kept really, really simple on the day. No major effort. Another good thing here, again, the walls are so thick, traffic dissipates. Once we seal the doors up top and all, you can't hear the traffic. So what we recorded here was used. So we didn't actually have to go to ADR. And thank God for that, because we had a very important scene filmed in the gardens, which I will explain in a few minutes. In the meantime, I'm gonna walk you inside the monastery as I... Well, all the visuals and the sounds of the bells in King's Landing in season 1 were recorded from that belfry. Okay, it's the only belfry that still uses the pulley system. You can see the pulley here, you can see it up there, and these are shots taken from Game of Thrones. However, as I've already realized, some of you have picked it up, the true reason why we're here, the most iconic sight of all, remains this little fountain. Because this is the place where Ned Stark challenges Cersei about her incest with her brother Jaime and the true parentage of their children, Tom and Joffrey and Myrcella. The slip of the tongue that led to his untimely beheading. And in fact, check out how simple it was to film this scene. All we did, we just stuck a hedge in front of the statue of the Madonna. You can still see the shrine protruding above the hedge. And the only prop we got here back on the day was a stone bench on the right-hand side where the blue jerrycans are for Ned Stark to sit on. Nothing else was added. Now this scene remains famous for Cersei's reply, which becomes a very famous quote, because she tells Ned Stark, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. So the whole episode focused on this one scene. It was in fact called You Win or You Die. What many people did not realize, this is the only time ever in the 7 seasons of the show that the term Game of Thrones was used. Had never been used before, has never been used since. So they went to dramatize the scene, they went for what we call a silhouette shot. They get Cersei against the light. But she, Lena Headey, the actress, wasn't tall enough. So this is a photo I took myself on the day and that's what they did. They stuck her up on what we call apple boxes. Apple boxes are these wooden boxes which are used by the grips department in connection with camera works, but they come in very handy to bring actors up to height. City of Mdina, our former capital. As you all know, Valletta is our current capital. But out here we are still in Rabat, so you need to physically cross the bridge to get you inside Mdina. Now Mdina is the most visited touristic site we have in Malta. So when HBO came here and requested to film for a whole week, it wasn't easy to do. But eventually they agreed on a compromise once again, which involved filming 5 days, but rotating streets and squares at a time, meaning we never block off the entire city in one go. So that meant that they did not have the time or the ability to physically remove anything. They covered whatever they could, but they had to be in and out from the same street or square within the day. And therefore, you get to see a lot more mistakes here inside Mdina. Case in point, this is the main entrance to the city, and in Game of Thrones, this becomes King's Gate. And you see it very clearly over here when Catelyn Stark and Roderick Cassel are riding in between those two columns. As you can see, all they did, they put a very fine layer of soil on the flagstones and a couple of background artists. They even didn't have time at the time to remove one of the bollards, which has since been removed, but they covered it in rope. But it's obvious that that's a bollard for cars, you know, so you wouldn't have had that in the day. Another issue is they did not remove the flagpole, and you can still see the flagpole on top. I remind you, in the 1300s there were no flags, just banners. So these are just some of the mistakes you see. Even when they're crossing over the bridge, you can still see the flagpole up top. So we had to film 3 back-to-back scenes here. First the arrival, and then in here to welcome her inside the city, to welcome Catelyn Stark. That's the angle of the camera looking this way. And you can see us, okay, the goat cloaks, as we're welcoming Catelyn Stark. You can still see the door and the window there. And rather than remove that pole, the no parking in the square sign, they erected a tent in front of it. On reverse angle now, looking this way. Can you all come this side for your added convenience so that I'll be to your right side? Right, so we're not just seeing Roderick Cassel and Catelyn Stark coming in, we're actually seeing the outside. Now that is the drop-off point and the pick-up point to get to Mdina. So it's very busy. So we had to get police lock-offs, and we had to build a little tent village out there just for this 4-second return shot. This was a mistake because they could have angled the camera such to miss the actual entrance. But again, we're always wiser later. Then after lunch, we came later in the afternoon to allow the light to settle, and this is the conspiracy scene when Ned Stark sends out his wife Catelyn to her sister Lisa Arryn to rally in the Knights of the Vale. They're standing right over here. You can still see up there the plaque and the coat of arms, but what you don't see is the mistakes they had done at San Anton. The large plaque and actual piping they covered with vines this time round. And they even extended the vines to save them the hassle of removing the floodlight. So all very, very simple. And of course the soil does the rest on the ground. Roderick Cassel is right where this lady is over here. Then on the reverse angle this way, if you can just once again pivot your heads, we're looking towards Ned Stark and Jory, and now we have the Mdina glass shop in the background. And they had no time to stay removing the signs, the letterbox, the doorbell, so they cheated. The same way they cheated at the monastery, but instead of a hedge, they stuck up a large stall. And you get to see not just the stall, but even the shops protruding above. And that's the bracket holding the Mdina glass sign, and that's the bracket holding the lantern. And I'm standing exactly where Ned Stark and Catelyn hug and kiss each other for the very last time before his premature beheading. All these props we have are still in storage in 3 large warehouses. So overnight, if we wanted to tonight, we could dress up Mdina's King's Landing. You come tomorrow and you see it like this at no cost. Because the people who actually dressed it up are my friends and they're still very much involved, which adds more fuel to the thought that they might be bringing the prequels here. So fingers crossed that might actually happen again. And hopefully that would coincide with a future visit from you should you come to Malta again. But in the show, you would know this as Cobbler's Square. And Cobbler's Square is famous because of that building, which doubled up as the Baelish brothels. Now, 7 years later, the place still looks exactly the same because not much effort was done here to dress it up. Okay, so starting off with the very brothels, you can see the working ladies up on the terrace up there. You can still see the blackened sill, the column, the oval window with the bars, and the trellis. We're just missing the lovely ladies. This was the sleazy bar in the corner, which was just that garage door open. We slung a little tent, couple of tables and chairs, and he's a Maltese actor chatting up a working lady by the door. But I mentioned earlier that those doors don't befit the era. So we replaced the door with a more medieval looking door. And here you can see Peter Baelish, Ned Stark and Catelyn Stark up on the terrace. Meanwhile then, Ned Stark and Peter Baelish exit to find the Lannister army arriving, and this is where the whole square comes to life. You will note immediately a lot of soil was placed on the ground over here. Soil had two functions: to cover the flagstones and to level the sharp incline, because they were meant to stage a very important sword fight. Other than that, it's all exactly the same. You see the blue garage door, the yellow flaking paint on the walls, the brown window, the well, the tree, the two green windows, and the color-coded wall. Nothing has photography behind the scenes, the boom lady, okay, with the boom and all, and the apple box always on standby in case they need to make him look taller. And this is my absolute favorite behind-the-scenes shot. That's the one I took personally of A. Dingelin in character as he's leaning against that blue door there instead of that white van. Should you get to watch this scene, check me out. I'm this guy when I get killed, okay? And here you can see my additional layers of clothing because I'm wearing the stunt armor underneath. Okay, so yes, one of the greatest things in being on Game of Thrones, you get to look many different characters. Called Mitra el Ferha, which a literal translation means the Cove of Happiness. All takes its name from this ravine you see over here, because historically, according to legend, Count Roger and his 10,000 horsemen made their way up from their ships this way to lay siege on the Arabs in Medina, which none of the locals really believe, because can you imagine, you know, it's so steep and then the sea is treacherous here and all, but there's still there a placard that manifests this legend, and also the reason why they believe that possibly this could have happened, because there are unexplained stone-cut steps leading down all the way to the sea. They're centuries old and no one seems to know from where they originated. Now this, as you may have been hear me say, this place is not known to most locals. It's actually used mostly in filming. It was actually used first for Game of Thrones. It was the scouts, local scouts from Game of Thrones that discovered this place. And as I was telling you, when we're looking out from the bastions in Medina, topography-wise, it looks completely different to what you were seeing over there. Nothing really happens on this side of the island.
as they were.
So, I don't know if you knew, but because some people get confused, our nation is not Malta. Our nation is actually the Maltese Islands. We're an archipelago of 6 islands, 3 larger inhabited islands and 3 smaller uninhabited islands. The inhabited islands are Malta, the largest with 400,000 people, Gozo with 36,000, and Comino with just 3 people living there. And probably if I had to do a tour in 2 years' time, I'd say there'll be no people because they're all like 79, 80 years old, so I doubt it they'll be living there much longer. Then there are 3 other islands which complement the archipelago. You have Cominotto, which is a smaller island off Comino, the crystal clear waters of the Blue Lagoon where Troy was filmed lie in between. We have St. Paul's Islands, 2 islands off St. Paul's Bay. We consider those as one, and that's where St. Paul shipwrecked in AD 60 when he brought Christianity to Malta. And of course, what you see behind us over there, that's Filfla, our smallest island, again uninhabited, and to its right Filfoletta, its younger sister. No one is allowed to land there, not even dive in its vicinity, without first obtaining a permit from the Maltese government. Reason being that it's again rich in natural and indigenous fauna. Okay, so it's all protected territory. Now, the reason why we're here is, however, because of this cliff. And that doubles up as the cliffs of Ahor in Game of Thrones. And that's where we first see Daenerys leading her Dothrakis. This is also where HBO managed, to a certain extent, to fool the viewers, possibly you as well, that there were 40,000 Dothrakis in her army. You know how many Dothrakis were here on the day? 40. That's as many horse riders and horses we could get down. So how did they manage to convince you? Well, basically they used very clever camera techniques, which I'm going to explain to you. So they put a camera over there where that stone is on a tripod on a fixed frame looking outwards. 15 Dothrakis on horseback are coming along this path led by the 3 principal actors in this scene, Daenerys, Khal Drogo and Otto the Blood Rider. Up on the cliff, riding right to left, we were 25 Dothrakis, I was one of them, and then that's on horseback, and about another 6 or 8 on foot just as fillers. And this is what you see on your screens. So, the way it was done, the Dothrakis on the ground are coming in at a tangent, whilst up top we're crossing right to left. So we put short red and white poles on the cliff at either end, being the edge of rain. So we know once we're past that pole, we're in shot. Once we're past that pole, we're out of shot. So as these fill in, up top, as soon as this guy clears the shot, he would trot the way around, camera angle doesn't pick him up, till he emerges over there. So you think there's a never-ending line of Dothrakis, there's no connection between these guys and those guys, and that's the same guy that left there 20 seconds earlier. See, that's the greatest thing of being on a budget. You may not get paid well, you may not eat well, you may not see the latest equipment, but you learn how to pull off a scene, which is the most important thing. Yep. Now, so the Azure Window, what it was, basically 2 caves, okay? And with the weathering, the process of the waves, the caves started thinning out. Eventually, the wall became so thin between them that it collapsed, leaving that arch. Okay? What many people don't know is that there are other examples similar to the Azure Window all over Malta and Gozo. You just have to know about them. This will be one such case. Probably in a few hundreds of years, this will look very much like the Azure Window. Okay, so here we are in the part which we know as the Red Waste. This is where Daenerys built her funeral pyre, which ran from where I'm standing, straight line. Okay, it's a raised pyre, so Khal Drogo's body is somewhere up here. And before she does the ritual of placing the 3 dragon eggs and then walking to the fire, and next morning coming out totally unscattered to the 3 dragons, she first stands over here and addresses the reduced Khalasar, the few remaining loyal Dothrakis, me included, knee-deep in the wet soil between the bush and the edge of the cliffs. These were the 2 night scenes. This is where it was so cold, dark and freezing. And this is what you see. So when she addresses us, she says 2 very important things. A, that she will burn anyone who causes us any harm. but more importantly, she addresses us as free men, meaning we're not compelled to stay. And on this, to dramatize the fact, the director picks 7 of us and asks them to start leaving. Once that happens, Daenerys turns her attention to Ser Jorah and she asks him to lead Mir Mazdur the Witch to the pyre. Because by now, Daenerys knows that Mir Mazdur was responsible for both the killing of her husband and her son. Ser Jorah, Ian Glenn, leads Mia, the actress who plays Mir Mazdur, to the edge of the pyre, pretty much where you're standing, facing out, however, tied to the pyre, and then we wrap her body in the same fire retardant gel they use on Formula 1 drivers. The idea was that we could light up the fire around her and give you the false impression that she is actually being burnt. However, when they did the rehearsal for this scene, it wasn't gusting force 9 on the day it was. So no matter how much fire retardant gel they put on her, she was getting still all the heat. And it was way too hot for Mia. She started yelling and said, guys, I'm sorry, it's way too hot, this I cannot film. Now, as you hopefully appreciate, it was never our intention to burn her alive, yeah? The idea was that eventually, not yet though, we would have replaced her with a mannequin, which looked like her, covered in a special wax which ignites instantly. But that wasn't due to happen till later. So what we needed was an ad-libbing shot, an unscripted shot to be able to change the camera angle from looking at the pyre and look elsewhere. And that's why they wrote this scene. This scene where Ser Jorah tries to convince Daenerys not to walk into the fire. And this scene was filmed right over my left-hand shoulder, over that blackened spot over there. And therefore that allowed the camera angle now to move and face that way. In the meantime, they redressed the set, they replaced Mia with a mannequin, and then they went to shoot back over the shoulders of the actors. You will note, in fact, here, she's just a burning dummy. Now, both actors here are way outside the minimum 4-meter safety distance that you meant to keep away from live fire. However, because the wind was fanning the flame so much, they were still getting scorched. So they still needed the same fire retardant gel on them as Mia had. What was ironic was that they are here burning, we're there freezing our asses off, you know. So yes, it was actually quite an ordeal to see them there.
It was a nice big arch here, okay?
Oh, that was...
It collapsed 8 March of last year, huh? Big sadness, huh? Big shame. But nature, natural. It's all under the sea. That's why it disappeared. 50 meters deep where we are. That's why it disappeared. 50, yes. Don't jump, okay, sir?